Well, hello everyone to one of my favorite lectures, the one that is describing the whole journey from ideation to product. So, all you product designers, industrial designers, transportation designers, and who knows, maybe even engineers, you may find this interesting. And bear with me, I'll tell you the story of how stuff happens. Now, I don't know about you, but I became a designer because it appealed immensely to me that I would just have to draw something on a piece of paper or some other way, and it would become reality. Ta-da! So this is the image of being a designer that I have always held dear, and I think there is some truth to this. This is actually what we do. The thing is, though, we go a bit beyond this, and there is a lot happening between that scribble on the lower right and that undoubtedly totally sophisticated automobile here in the middle. And I'll show you all the different terms and all the means that we have as designers to arrive at a perfect solution. So it begins with ideation. Ideation means that you are creating, capturing, and developing ideas. So first we create the ideas. I'm going to show you a few techniques on how to create ideas perfectly. Then you capture your ideas. I will show you ways to capture your ideas perfectly. And then you develop your ideas. And I will also show you the best ways to develop ideas. So the techniques involved here, like I said, we're going to look at idea creation, idea capturing, and idea development, right? These three bits are what this presentation consists of. Let's look at the different types of idea creation that we have at our disposal as designers. The most common one is the so-called problem solution. Find a problem and you solve it. The thing is, though, it's not very sophisticated, is it? I mean, you just do something, and it may not take care of all the problems. So there may be another problem that occurs with your solution. So you solve that, and that will also have a problem attached, and then you solve that. So it's this endless chain of just quickly fixing something, and you end up with this monster that has a lot wrong with it and is maybe, in the end it works, but you have a lot of remedial fixes in it. There is a very famous example for this. I find computers are a perfect example for this. There are so many things in there that just don't seem to work properly. So they have a huge array of things attached to solve the problems that are created by solving the problems. You can do something like this as well. You can have what they call a derivative idea, which is a bit like this. You find something that exists and you change it a little bit. So here we have a coffee cup with two handles. Why not? Just one example, here's a restaurant in the Netherlands, and they couldn't think of a way of making it more interesting. So what they did is they just used a house and turned it upside down. Why not? You can do this. You can create a symbiotic idea. So you several things into one, and that could be like this. Yeah, you combine a trumpet and a drum and an octopus, and you get that thing. And it's done a lot. There's a lot of mixing going on right now. A fun example, I think, is mobile phones. Look at a mobile phone. It is everything. It's a dictaphone, it's a telephone, it plays videos, it goes online, you name it. So it is a combination of many different things. Sometimes you may have that revolutionary idea that leaves tradition behind. And as an example, I would like to show you the shoe. To be more specific, this kind of shoe. We always assume that a shoe contains all your toes. But why not have a shoe where each toe has a separate compartment? That is quite revolutionary in its own right. There are other fun examples that I can think of. This thing here is a bathtub. Now, I think what is revolutionary about this is that it goes away entirely from the notion of a bathtub. We always think of bathtubs as heavy bowl type things that are firmly planted on the ground, when actually it isn't really necessary. All you need is a receptacle that contains water and has a shape that is conducive to harboring a human body. So basically a hammock will do the same trick if you do it right. So here's what looks like a hammock, but it is actually a bathtub. You can stumble upon stuff, and while you cannot plan that, you can definitely keep an open mind when it happens to you and maybe make use of it. Penicillin, for example, was discovered in this way. They were never looking for it, and they just had an accident in the lab and realized, oh, this could actually be used for something. So keep an open mind to your mistakes. There can be something in them. You can do artistic innovation. Sometimes that is what we do. I have to say there are a lot of people out there who think that we designers do nothing but that. But actually, that is not true. Yet, every now and then, you may have to do that in your job. And it could be something as simple as this. You just add a bit of deco to something. And it happens. I've seen it myself in Shanghai. Yeah, you have dogs like these. Just to give you. There could be a philosophical idea. This would be nice. I'm not saying every designer should have that capability, but it would be nice if you had a philosophy from which could spring your own, perhaps, theory or a way of doing things that is specific to you and that is very idealistic and ideological. And there are people like that out there. We know them. You can discover stuff with the help of computers. I'm only mentioning Google here as an example. But you can go further than that. I think you can discover a lot of stuff in CAD. A lot of logical conclusions can be drawn when you make yourself a functional CAD model. And that is the place where much idea material can come from. Or you do a targeted innovation. Keep in mind, innovation doesn't necessarily mean invention. It doesn't mean that it has to be new to the world entirely. Innovation just means you are changing something. So if you are changing for something that can already be done, all you need is a recipe. And that's what you do. Okay, so sometimes design means making something to recipe, just in a different context. And then it is also an idea. Let's see what else you can do. You can actually, brainstorming. We've all heard the term brainstorming. It means a bunch of people sit together and just spill their guts and try to have epiphanies. The only problem with that is, if you don't write these down or record them in other ways, they're gone. So I suggest this, do brain writing instead. It's a much more structured thing. And you can say something like, okay, everybody here writes down an idea within every 3 minutes. And after an hour, we compare what we've got. So you have a record then, and you have the same outcome. You may not bounce ideas off each other as much as you do during the brainstorming, but that's something you can do during the intervals when you compare notes. So probably still better than brainstorming. There are a number of products out there that help you create ideas. So there's the whole creative problem solving process stuff out there. If you absolutely have to do that, get yourself some software. You can also read up on lateral thinking. The most famous author on that, to my knowledge, is Edward de Bono. And he created all these interesting tools, idea generation tools. So one of them is the random entry idea generation tool. You basically pick any word or object and associate three. Yeah, so wild stuff. Airplane and cow. Airplane, cow, airplane, cow, plane, plane, cow. Yeah, it does something. It gives you something. It gives you an image. It jogs your imagination. And obviously, if you want to do something more strategic, you choose words that will lead you to a project and to a product that you're actually doing. Let's say it's about an office chair, and that office chair is about increasing well-being. Well, how about starting with office chair and well-being? Well-being, office chair, well-being. Already you can feel that there is something's happening there, right? You could do a provocation-based idea generating tool where you basically exaggerate. You are making the problem much worse than it actually is. Yeah, you completely exaggerate. Office chair, you say, office chairs kill people. Office chairs cannot be sat on. They are terrible thing. They cause disabilities. Just to really drive home the point, and that creates a maximum scenario that you can then work with. There is what they call a movement technique, also by. So you're basically examining the governing dynamics, like an astronomer. You try to recognize patterns. You try to understand what the object of your investigation always does. If it's an office chair, you could say, well, the office chair always seems to roll around and always somehow has the wheels in the wrong place when you're getting up and all that, right? So that would be then the problem, and you try to solve that. There is the challenge idea generating tool, and you just ask, which means you question everything there is. Why does the office chair have to have a back? Why does the office chair have to be upholstered? Why does the office chair have to have wheels? And you may find that some of these questions have no answer. And well, there's your window of opportunity to make a big change. And that is your idea then. You could create a concept fan, which means you systematically create a very wide range of ideas, like a fruit basket, right? So you make yourself create on purpose completely different solution proposals to the same problem. Or you disprove something that everybody takes for granted. So if it is an office chair, you might say, everybody takes for granted that an office chair is black. So right there you have something that you can deviate from. You make a red one or a translucent one. Edward de Bono also gave us another interesting tool called the 6 thinking hats. And I've tried to visually summarize how it works here. The idea is basically you get a focus group of people together, could be 6 people, could be more, and Every one of them takes on a role, puts on a hat, if you will. You don't really have to put on these hats. You could just put a paper sign in front of everybody. But the main thing is everybody has their specific role and their specific responsibility. So one person is all about management, and one person is all about information, such as, PR, press releases, advertising. One person is all about emotions. This could be the user, how do you feel as a 45-year-old housewife to use this thing? One is all about discernment, so that would be the super picky guy, like the very sophisticated chef in the kitchen who isn't easily pleased with anything, a critic. Then you have an optimist who thinks, oh, this will be fine because the big picture says this and that. And then you have the creative person who will try to make it as outlandish as possible. And everybody here around this table with their hats on tries to push it as far as they can in their own capacity. They might write it down, they might do video recordings of a debate. And in the end, you have hopefully created something that is pushed to the extreme in 6 different areas. That should create a very strong, very interesting, complex idea. You might be familiar with the notion of left-brained and right-brained. So Method Herman just means look at everything both from this analytical sequential perspective as well as the interpersonal and imaginative. Thinking outside the box is a term that you might have heard. The box being the context that we all know. So you can think outside the box only if you know what there might be outside the box. It takes a certain amount of imagination, obviously, but maybe you have that because you are a designer. So you just compare what they have and then you do what they don't do and don't have. Okay. Business war games, the company versus the user, makes sense when you think about it because there are certain interests the company has, and then there are certain interests the user has, and they are necessarily at odds with each other. Like if we use a coffee machine here as an example, I think the user would buy the $2 solid gold coffee maker that is totally intelligent, you know. But the company isn't going to make the $2 solid gold coffee maker that is totally intelligent because they're simply not going to earn anything doing that. So these two positions will need to be turned into role play, and between the two, you will hopefully be able to negotiate the middle ground, and then you have something that hopefully both parties like to the largest possible degree. The user might settle for a coffee maker that is steel, not gold, and the company might settle for one that's $20, not $2. Okay. Here's a thing called the SWOT analysis, which is incredibly useful. And if you haven't heard this before, I can only recommend you to really get into this. Whatever you start, if you're starting a project, always do a SWOT analysis first. It's a wonderful thing. And out of that will necessarily come ideas or at least impulses for ideas because you are identifying what is good and what is bad about the product that you're replacing. So if you know what is good about the product that you're replacing, obviously you'll want to make sure that your new proposal is good at that too, or probably even better at it. And if it is bad at something, well, you want to make sure that your product is not bad at it, right? Same with the opportunities and threats. You can use these strategically to create your ideas perfectly. There are a few others that I won't torture you with, but if you want to read up on them, obviously you can. There's the USIT, Unified Structured Inventive Thinking. You can also do thought experiments, which can be a lengthy thing. I mean, this list here is by no means exhaustive. But this is all about, this is basically a dreaming exercise. what if? And that is a good thing to do if you're, uninspired, for example. Not everybody is completely buzzed by doing a coffee maker, but you could go through this list here and say, okay, I'm going to challenge everything I don't like about coffee makers here, and I'm going to solve the problems with it, and I'm going to try to be progressive as far as you can be progressive with a coffee maker and all that. You could try the 5 W's. These are questions. Yeah. What happened? Why did it happen? And you would apply these to the existing product. And depending on what you get back, that could be then, yeah, your roadmap to your ideas. You could simply associate stuff, and I would find that incredibly useful for a designer because we do a lot of associating, and it gives you the right vibe for things. So if let's just say, for example, yeah, let's just stick with our office chair. What associations do you have with an office chair? You associate workplace, you associate serious, you associate well dressed. So immediately that gives you a good line of adjectives and nouns that you can use to create your design proposal. They have to match that. The association has to be right with an office chair. You could try to create a decision tree. This is good for justifying your idea. It means you're able to say, I did this because. Sometimes you create ideas that you have no use for. Don't let them slip away. Create yourself an ideas bank. This could just be a Word document that you add to. Every time you have an idea, this could just be a little book. This could even just be a tradition of you sending emails to yourself when you have an idea, always with idea in the subject line. And then if you ever do an email search years later on idea, you will have all these ideas in your email. Metaphor is very much like association. Right, so we are now done with the different tools for creating ideas. Let's see how we can capture ideas. I believe I have everything on this one page here that you can use to capture your ideas. I believe we can sketch and draw ideas. We can write them down in a diary. You could do a video of something or yourself talking. You could have a dictaphone and speak into it. You could simply create files on your computer to remind yourself and describe the ideas. You could take photos or put sticky notes or other notes all over your workplace. I think that's pretty much how we can capture our ideas. I make sure I always have something with me that I can use to capture ideas. I think emailing to myself has worked best for me, or just speaking into a dictaphone. Because you can take that anywhere and do that anywhere. Sorry, just had a house fire this morning, still coughing from it. Idea development. How do we develop an idea? Okay, now here's where it gets really strategic, and this is probably the most important part here of my lecture. To develop an idea, you're going through a large number of steps. First of all, from all these different ideas that you have created during the ideation and captured, you need to select which of these you're going to take forward. So in order to do that successfully, you need to have criteria. What will be the criteria that you use to select your best idea? Let's say it's a light bulb. We can use criteria like these here on the right. Certain performance data, durability data, who knows? It could be anything really, because when you're designing things, you can have a much longer list of much softer criteria as well. Something like has to be liked by 3-year-old girls or something like that. And once you have selected your idea, you get into the concept development. Concept development has 6 steps or 6 considerations that you really should take very seriously. First of all, is there a functionality that your user is going to expect? I'm showing here 2 police officers puzzled by flying saucer components. The thing is, to have a successful design, you need to give the user something they expect. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you can puzzle your user, but it may not be such a good idea. You will create a lot of problems if you're designing something that isn't intuitive and cannot be used immediately. So if you can make it in such a way that the use is clear immediately and you don't need a manual or nothing, you can just see this thing for the first time in your life, pick it up and do the right thing with it, because hey, it's designed right. It may also need to look right in terms of what the user might expect. If you're going to have a bathroom fixture, it really shouldn't look like I don't know, a military implement or something like that. You want aesthetics that say, this is where I belong and this is what I do. And this will have to do with convention. There is a little bit of truth in the way we do things every time, and I would stick with that. There will also be haptics that the user expects. You may not have heard the word haptics, but you may have heard the word haptic feedback. That is when your phone vibrates when you're hitting the touch screen. Haptics just means this is what you get when you touch something. How does the surface feel? Is anything coming back at you? If you push a button, how does that button feel when you push it? These are considerations that we designers are making. Like when you're driving a car these days and you're activating the indicator lever, it's a very pleasant experience, isn't it? And that is a designed experience. This is not the result of necessity. I have an old car from the 1980s where when you activate the indicator lights or the lever, it feels and sounds like you're breaking a chicken bone. It's an old American car. So the way it feels when you activate it, that is also your job. There also will be acoustics associated with that. Like I said, when I activate my indicator lever, it sounds like I'm breaking a chicken bone. Normal modern cars don't do that anymore. They have satisfying, dark, soft sound when you activate that lever, and that is also designed. Somebody tried out different components and materials until it sounded right. There may be manufacturing processes that your client is most happy with, and they're usually the ones that they have the most experience with and that they're set up to do. And there will be norms and standards that you need to comply with. And before you curse that, wait a minute, it is actually a very good thing, because if you familiarize yourself fully with all the norms and standards that are expected of your product, your design is halfway done and almost necessarily successful, because norms and standards are in the interest of the user. So they're giving you a lot of default settings that are extremely useful and contribute to the success of your design. If you're going to design an office chair, and maybe one norm or one standard is that this thing must be adjustable within 37 to 46 centimeters of height. Well, bingo, there you go. You have your question answered right there of how high this thing should be and what its range of adjustability should be. So norms and standards are a great thing to be aware of. They help you. And then obviously you will come up with more than one thing that ticks these boxes. You always want to do that as a designer. I always do 3. And then you put them through the paces and make them jump through hoops and see which one comes out best. It's the most balanced one. That's the concept evaluation. And a concept evaluation can be done in many ways, but I think the best way you do your concept evaluation is by making a table or a matrix where you can mark it, basically. Yeah, you have 10, maybe more criteria, and you give each criterion a mark. So maybe the light bulb achieves 90% satisfaction regarding its ability to stay cool, and it achieves 100% satisfaction in how long it lasts, and so on. And then you do the math in the end, and you clearly know which is your best concept. It's the one with the highest average percentage, right? Once that's behind you, you can get into prototype making. And the prototype should be in many ways like the final product, but obviously it will still have a lot of unresolved issues. And once you've made the first prototype, you test the first prototype, and then you make another prototype, and you test that, and you refine that, and you test again, and so on, until you really are perfectly happy with what you've got. Just a word on prototypes before we move on. I think there are really only 2 categories of prototypes. You can either have a functionality prototype, which works pretty much like the real thing, but it may look nothing like it. Or you have a form study prototype, which looks like the real thing, but may not work. And you may need both. And maybe many versions of both. So create some shelf space. Each project should mean that you're creating lots of prototypes. Quickly, what is the difference between a prototype and production design? First of all, materials and fidelity are the 2 main issues that we deal with when we compare these 2. The materials are whatever they are, but you'll probably find yourself not using the real materials in the prototype. You might know the solo wheel thing here. This is the prototype of it, and the real solo wheel is injection molded. But you wouldn't want to make an injection molded prototype simply because of the tooling costs. So the tooling, the prototype of the solo wheel might have been fiberglass, a material that pretty much behaves like injection molded plastic once it's ready, but it goes through an entirely different process in making it, and it is far more suitable to making one-offs. Yeah. So the thing is, if you're making an injection mold to make this, you have the capacity to make 1,000,000 of these, but you don't want to make 1,000,000, and you don't want to invest $500,000 to make it. You just want the one, and then you might test it and crash it and make another one, right? So one thing to get into then is materials, so that you know which materials you can use for your prototypes that are closest to the materials of the planned production version. In order to achieve fidelity. Fidelity is, in a nutshell, how much the prototype looks like the real product and works like the real product. That means, of course, that not absolutely everything needs to be in it. You know, you can probably forget about graphics or decorations and things in the prototype. And there are also certain limitations that your prototype will have. So let's say we are making a rubber duck. That is our mass-produced product. And we are making a prototype of the little rubber ducky. Obviously, the real rubber duck is going to be probably a blow-molded plastic piece. This one here, though, our prototype, will be painted, which the plastic piece won't be. It may be made from wood, jelly tongue or something like that. So it will be solid and not empty. It'll have different weight because of that. And it'll be a different material. So it's very different already. And that means that your prototype rubber duck may perform very differently. Worse than the final product, or it may perform better. Both is bad because it's different from what you can expect. Obviously, the prototypes will also be a lot more expensive than the final product because of all the man hours that go into it and all the material that goes into it. And you're not just making one, you're making many. So many rubber ducks with many price tags attached. Let's see what the trends are regarding this whole prototyping thing. It used to be the motto of most design schools to go get your hands dirty, go down in the workshop, make it, get stuck in. I don't believe in that anymore because these days CAD has become so good and you can simulate so much in CAD that it really can actually be a waste of time to get making stuff. And don't forget that going down in the workshop and making things, there's always a certain risk attached. There's a health risk attached. There's a safety risk attached. CAD is safe. I've never met anybody who had their finger chopped off by their keyboard. So I always go into CAD before I go into the workshop because there are a lot of things that you can check out in CAD. You can verify your measurements. You can just get an idea for the overall shape of things. If you're a good 3D CAD modeler, you can make things so much more quickly in CAD than you can make them in a workshop. So I would say once you've got figured out all the angles in CAD, that's when you take it down to the workshop and make it. So test in CAD first. To give you a fun example from industry, you probably know that cars are being crash tested before they are introduced to the market. And they always used to do it in this way. They got an actual production car, put it into a crash studio, and crashed it in a controlled way. And that produced reasonably good results, but somehow the cars that were built before 2000 never reached the safety levels as the cars built after the year 2000. And also it was incredibly expensive to do these crash tests. I don't know the exact numbers, but we're talking millions of dollars to do something like this. Because these crash test dummies are very expensive measuring devices that simulate the human body and so on. So they really stuck sensors and electronics into these crashing vehicles like crazy just to comprehend what's going on in all the different parts of it. These days, though, we no longer have to do that. You can crash a CAD model, a perfectly realistic CAD model of your vehicle in a computer millions of times in many different ways, in many different speeds, and you can optimize until it's absolutely perfect. And that is why we have super safe cars these days. Other things that are going on are everybody uses CAD. We're not talking about the future here. We're talking about the present. All this is the present. It may only be your future because you may not be doing this yet in your studies, but you definitely should get into CAD and get very good at it. You should 3D print stuff, and you should make your prototypes in the most intelligent possible way. And that means, in my opinion, using CAD and using 3D printing, because the fidelity of your prototypes will go way up if you're going to do it this way. A word on models. We make a lot of models in design schools, and I think it's always best to make a full-scale model. A full-scale model simply gives you the best representation of what to expect. And yeah, that's the end of that story. So we're going back now to our process of idea development. We've gone through the prototype refinement and testing just now. And now we're looking at tooling. Tooling means you're setting up your serial production. And you may not be doing that personally, although I was often involved in doing that. So when we created thermoforming tooling, for example, I was always in negotiations with the technicians and with the engineers who were creating the molds, because mold making can require compromises, and they will want your opinion on how to resolve these. Sometimes you may need to redesign parts of your object because they just weren't right for the tooling that was available. And then in the end, you will want to have intellectual property protection in place. If you're working for a big company, not a problem, they will do that for you. But if not, then you may be the one who drives that process. So you need to know what patents are, how to get them, what design patent is, how to get it, copyrights, blah de blah. So that's the story of a product from ideation to production. And I hope you see this little sketch and this little vehicle in a different light now. All this should go into it, and I hope you will be able to make use of some of the things that I've shown you there. All the best in your projects.